Today we are here to discuss Golem. So this is a new release from Cranio Creations and same people who made Grand Austria Hotel and Lorenzo the Magnifico. It's one of Miranda's favorite design teams. So before we get started though, if you would want to follow along and join us on all of our exploits as we go through our collection of 3,000 plus, or 3,000-ish games, I should say. I don't know, theaters around there.
You don't have an exact count?
I do and don't. I've got a count, but apparently Board Game Geek is a little finicky on how it shows the numbers, and I probably have some I don't have inventoried, so it's somewhere around there. But if you'd like to follow us and join along as we go through our journey, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell over there, because we've got lots more to go, and this we're going to probably be here for many, many more years. So we got Melissa here with us today, and so Golem is a 2021 release. It technically released in 2021 in Europe, but in the United States it just recently came out in 2022. It's a Board Game Geek rating of 7.6 and a Board Game Geek rank of 1680. It's a 1 to 4 player game. Average length is 90 to 120 minutes. Age 14 and up. I highly recommend the 14 and up just because of the complexity of understanding the rules.
Yeah, and also it's going to take longer than that first time out.
Yeah, the gameplay is longer than 90 to 120 minutes until you learn it. I mean, the gameplay itself isn't that complex once you get it down, but the rules are. We'll get to that. Designed by Flaminia Brazzini, Virginio Gigli, and Simone Luciani. Art by Francesco Ciampi and Roberto Grasso. Published again by Cranio Creations. It has an MSRP of $79.99, which is pretty steep. Card House and Miniature Market both have it for $63.99. Amazon has it for $81.92 for whatever reason, so it's actually higher than MSRP on Amazon.
I found that a lot lately with Amazon, though.
Yeah,
so.
It's kind of weird, but yeah, I mean, so far the cheapest I've seen is Card House and Miniature Market, so I go for one of those. So let's talk about the quality of the components. So the wood bits are pretty cool. They come in the player colors, and you have golems, which are kind of bigger pieces, and then you've got your students, which wear robes and are kind of more narrow. You have marbles but they're not really glass marbles, they're wooden marbles, which I liked because I don't like the texture of glass marbles. It's one of my idiosyncrasies, my many idiosyncrasies.
It's fine, I have texture issues too.
Yeah.
So.
You have player boards. They are not inlaid, except they have a punch hole for the two eyes for the golem where you put your marbles. That's the only inlay, if you will. And then they also come in components, so you add on to your board. And those are randomized as far as those add-on components. You have a bunch of cardboard bits. We did not like using the cardboard bits, so we upgraded them using the Stonemaier replacements for clay and for gold bars until we ran out. We also used like little scrolls for knowledge tokens, but we kept running out of them, so we ended up having to use the cardboard. And we replaced the coin because I hate the little yellow numbered coins, so we replaced them with our poker chip coins that I always play with.
I will say, though, with the original cardboard pieces, with the coin it didn't matter because you have your variety, but you had, like, this is a knowledge piece here, and it's 1, but you also had a 3 and then the 5, so you didn't have to have a huge pile of them, which was nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're functional, but they're not great cardboard. You have a bunch of cardboard tiles to randomize the board. I always like when there's variety and you can change the board.
Yes.
Oddly, they kept calling them in the book red, yellow, and blue tracks, but they made the tiles green, orange, and blue. And that was really confusing.
Well, and it also didn't help that there's a tree line up at the top of the red track, and so it kind of makes you think it's a green track. So every time I would have to move on the red track, I had to stop and look for it.
Yeah. So, there was a lot of confusion when it came to understanding the rule book and the translation, because there was no there wasn't a lot of diagrams, but we'll get into the rule book later.
Yeah.
The most prominent thing you see on this is actually the marble. It's kind of basically a distributor of the marbles, and that's pretty cool looking. It's a synagogue, and you drop the marbles in, and it randomizes which path they go down, and it worked pretty well.
I thought it was a lot of fun because you would have on any given turn. They all ended up with at least one marble in them.
Yeah.
But you would have some rows that would have 1 or 2, and other rows might have 4.
Right.
Which is great when you're trying to accumulate whatever it is that you're trying to accumulate.
And I thought that was a cool mechanism.
Yeah.
In the functionality of it is very much like what you find in Grand Austria Hotel with the dice randomizing and having multiple dice of the same value. So it worked very much like that, just replaced it with marbles. So all in all, I don't think there's any, I mean, the board is giant. I should say that. It's a very big board. It's larger than your typical game board. But there's nothing super exciting about it. I mean, I like the golems, and the students are okay. The card quality is actually pretty nice. It's linen finished on all the cards. But yeah, I can't see giving this probably more than a 6.5 at the highest, I think. I mean, there are some nice bits, but for the most part, it's just cardboard.
I was going to say a 7.
Okay.
Just because they really did give you such a variety of pieces, which I think is nice.
Yeah. Then there are a lot of bits.
Yeah.
So let's talk about theme on this. So I was not aware and very familiar with the whole history of the golem and the fact that it was part of the Jewish tradition and the stories. I had no idea about that. So that was very interesting to me.
My experience on that was very limited from a science fiction-y FBI investigation TV show that shall not be named. So,
yeah, I mean, I thought that it was really interesting to find out the story and how they tied it into this, where the golems kind of got out of control and you had to keep them, under your control as much as you could with knowledge. And if they got ahead of your students, then you had to pay knowledge. I thought that was really clever. And then they have menorahs all throughout the game that act as multipliers for your score in this, which is like, that's first thing that clued me in that this was part of the Jewish, tradition. And the fact that then when I look at the word, I'm like, well, it kind of looks like a traditional Jewish word. So I guess it does make sense. I just never thought about it. Yeah. Golem to me was the little creature from the Lord of the Rings books, so it's
different spelling though.
Yeah. So, but I was familiar with golems being large rock creatures too, but I just never investigated the history of it. But this game,
it's educational fun.
Yeah, I like when a game teaches me something, even though that wasn't the purpose of the game necessarily, but it was cool because I always like to get that backstory. So, I like the theme of it. I like how it's integrated into the gameplay. And the color schemes are really interesting on this and pretty. I like the fact that you don't have your traditional red, blue, green, yellow characters. You've got teal, purple, gray, and orange. And then, I just wish they had referenced the colors on the board differently, because that's clearly not red, yellow, and blue. Blue's okay, but the red
looks brownish and then has the trees at the top.
Yeah.
And then the yellow does look orange. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at where the menorahs are, they have the red, yellow, and blue there, so you can
and
tell.
The cards even are yellow, like a bright yellow.
Yeah.
But just the track is orange, and then on your
on the player board they did the same thing. Yeah, it's the same color scheme, so it's really was confusing because there was not clarity in the rules, and that's where the big suffering is. We'll get to in a minute. For the theme, I'm probably going to give this I don't know, maybe an 8, because I really like how the story of the golem plays into the gameplay of this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. I'd say an 8.
All right, so moving on to the rules. So the rule book, it's got a pseudo cover. Actually, the back is more of a cover than the front.
Yeah.
That's a traditional cover on the back, but the front has kind of going straight into the components. And then after that, the first page is fine. That's when the problems start, is after the first page. The book is actually only 20 pages long with cover. So when I first got this out, I was like, oh, this is not going to be too bad. And that was a mistaken statement.
Well, because you saw it and you saw there's lots of pictures.
And the rules
the font
only
isn't an okay size.
The font's okay. And it only goes to 14 pages as far as the rules. After that, it's like appendices and such.
Yeah.
So it didn't look like it was going to be that complex of a read.
Yeah.
It took us about an hour to 2 hours to figure out how to play this game, and we still kind of stumbled through during the gameplay.
Yes.
Because the setup by itself was a problem. They gave you, for the first time play, instructions on how to set it up. So, because normally you're going to randomize pretty much everything. But for the first time play, it told you specific cards to place, and that was fine. They told you specific tiles to put out, and that was where the colors became a problem. Red, yellow, and blue, it kept saying. And it's like, well, the tiles are green, orange, and blue. And that's when it first ran into that problem. But it didn't take too long to figure it out eventually. But the real problem came when we started looking at the player boards. That's where things kind of fell apart. And the player boards, they basically had a setup that was already predetermined for each of the players for part of it. But then it didn't really specify on the auxiliary boards, those parts, who was supposed to get what. It told you which cards for the objective cards to give. It told you the tiles and everything that was supposed to go out for that. Mm-hmm. But when it came to the objectives, and it didn't really, it used the terminology that they hadn't explained yet in the setup. So we kept trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does it reference? Again, there was not clear diagramming, or there's basically just a picture of the game board, and that's it. And when it comes to the player board, they gave us one example of a player board, and it was player 2 of all players. I mean, it wasn't like the player 1 one. So it was kind of really a weird situation. And then it goes through and gives you your starting tokens, where you have some tiles that give you your starting benefits, which are all iconography. The iconography is definitely not clear from that. And when you go into it, it's like, okay, why am I getting these things? Because it has like a story, like Sally gets these pieces and so on. And it's like, okay, I don't get that from these pictures, why that's happening. Mm-hmm. And then it was combining that with what you got on the board, and it didn't really tell you why you got anything. It just, you got these things. And whenever I got my character, I had no idea why I got an extra knowledge. And it turns out it's because they assumed I had the board you had. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, that makes no sense, because it wasn't spelled out. Mine
was knowledge focused. And the other thing that was confusing during setup is my beginning tile has a picture of an open book on it. Uh-huh. And that's explained, I think, in one place in that book, and not in the setup.
Yeah, it's not at all in the setup. But that was the thing. There's a lot of stuff that you had to know to put the gold bars onto the upgrades. But that was not in the setup anywhere. It's just, I'm supposed to put this gold bar here for some reason. Right. I didn't know that. But the drawing doesn't show it. So there was nothing to tell you how to set this up. So you just had to look at go here, reference it, and try to sift through the rules to find something to tell you why the things were. Yeah. And that took us a long time to figure out. Mm-hmm. Once we got it down, it kind of made sense, but it wasn't intuitive. None of it was intuitive.
I think about halfway through, I finally understood how everything kind of worked together.
Yeah. And once you get it, the engine's pretty cool. I mean, I like the way it works. It's just, it really needed clarification. These are some of the worst rules I've seen in a long time. The gameplay portion wasn't that bad. Once you got to the gameplay, it started making sense, but there was still a lot of references that were not in here that you had to go to the appendices to look up. So there was still a lot of back and forth as you read through it. And sometimes I had to stop and reread a thing a few times for it to click with me. Oh, this is what they're trying to say. And, I then have to translate that for Miranda or Dad and everything. I think you were following along, but the two of them were completely toned out. So, so I had to, translate it for them several times. And I think her dad just kind of gave up halfway through, and he was just going to wing it as we played. Mm-hmm.
Which I think has something to do with the long-windedness of the directions too.
I agree with that too. All in all, I can't give these rules somewhere between a 2 and a 3. I'm going to give it a 2.5. I mean, it does have the content in here, but it's horribly organized, and it
and
really,
it could benefit from some supplemental diagrams or maybe an asterisk with an explanation.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to tell you how the setup works. It was just hunt and peck and try things, and it just really made no sense. So, but we did finally figure it out, and once we did, it was much better. So let's move on to the gameplay. So the gameplay on this, basically, they do have a cheat card, but it is pretty much useless. There's one here. So basically, at the beginning of the round, you're going to drop the marbles into the track to set up the combination of marbles, because each turn you're going to have the option of drafting a marble, up to 2 marbles, and you have eye holes that they go in on your golem on your board to hold those 2 marbles. Or you can play your rabbi, and that's kind of a different track where you have tiles that give you different actions that you mix up, and I like that there's a variety, and the sequencing of that is different. Those rabbis will determine future turn orders for later rounds, and this is a 4-round game. The game ends after round 4, and there's a final scoring. So, placing, you can choose what order. You can play your rabbi first, you can draft a marble first, play the rabbi second, and then draft your second marble, however you want to do it. You can do whatever order. So, strategically, you got to kind of decide what is you're going for. And there's a lot of things that are going to guide you. One is there's actions associated with each row where the marbles are. But secondly, you get the power of however many marbles are in that row, and that's going to determine the strength of whatever action you get. It's very similar to Grand Austria Hotel if you've played that. But in this case, the marbles color also has significance, whereas in Grand Austria Hotel, it's just dice. Here, when you choose a marble, it has red, yellow, or blue color, which is going to move you up, your student up on one of the 3 tracks. Or it's white, where it can represent any color, but does not let you move up the track. And then there's 1 black marble, which lets you move up 2 tracks, but has no color significance. So you get your choice of the different marbles, and based on different player counts, there's a different distribution of them. I thought that was a really cool mechanism in the game. And the goal is you want your students to stay at least as far along the track as your golems are. You start the game with a student on each track at the 0 or at the 1 level, but you also get 2 golems to start the game that are already on the board. And each turn, before you actually take any of your actions, the first thing you have to do is move your golems up, so they advance first. So you have to catch up with the golems right away. And your strength of movement is going to be variable during the game. It's going to start, you've got a movement on your board, which is also tied to an income of scoring, I thought that was cool pairing. And then there's also a card that represents each round that has a number from what we've seen, 1 to 3 movement as well. So you have to add those 2, and that's how much movement you have to spread out amongst all your golems. So having more golems on the board is beneficial because you can spread that movement out across them more. But every time you build a golem, you have to raise your stat twice on the movement board, so it actually increases the movement on you. So, but it does also give you more victory points.
Right.
But you have the option during the game, one of the actions you periodically can take, depending on what comes up on the tiles or in the selections of the different things on the board, is you can kill your golems. So you send them to the graveyard, you get a perk for doing that, but you reduce yourself down the movement track. So it's a balancing act, and I like that a lot. There's a lot I liked about this game. The different actions that you can possibly take is you can build up, you've got stats on your board you've got your education or your book track, basically, which is what you, as a librarian, a former librarian.
I was super happy with that track. The thing is, though, so in the 4 turns, I barely got all of my objectives met because on one of the turns, I had to deviate a little bit and mess with some of the golem building so that I could not have to take the extra moves the next round. So
Yeah,
it's a tight game that
It
way.
is definitely tight like that. I got 2 of my objectives done, and then after that I acquired one more. So you start with 3 in the game. Mm-hmm. I acquired 1 additional one. I didn't get 2 of my 4 objectives completed. And you get perks at the end of the game for each objective you complete, but also for having different objectives completed, you get bonus points on top of that.
Right.
Which can be significant. It's like up to 9 points you can get as a bonus on top of the individual ones, which range from, I think, 2 to 6, depending on how difficult they are to complete.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of things that can happen during the game. But going up the book track is going to allow you to collect these books, and they have 5 different columns you can play them into, which you can only, as you move up the track, it will let you hold more books in each column. Mm-hmm. The nice thing is when you play one, they basically stack upon each other, and you can trigger them again.
Yes.
Not to mention, on the board itself, there is a tile that can be activated that will also trigger along with the book. So it's kind of like getting an extra book along the way. Then you have your golem central area for developing your golems. This allows you to not only build your golems, but you can upgrade them. It took us a while to figure that out too, because that wasn't clearly delineated in the setup either. But you have bits and pieces that you assemble a golem in the middle that is basically inactive, and you get to if you take actions during the action phase, you might be able to upgrade those to flip them over to an active state, and they give you special abilities, one of which was super powerful. Lets you control how much, basically you could ignore the cards when you're determining your movement.
Yes.
Thankfully, I saw the value of that early, and I flipped mine right away, and I think you did too.
Yeah.
I think Miranda was the only one who didn't, and her golems are kind of running away.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of cool abilities you can give them. One of them, when you kill the golems, you get the ability twice when you play it. That was really nice, and I mean, everything felt powerful. I like that.
It was just a question of which one of the powerful things was going to benefit you the most.
Exactly. And everybody's board was the same, which I also like, because the fact that there is a little bit of variability, it doesn't feel out of control because most of the stuff is the same. Mm-hmm. That track was, or not really a track per se, but it was, the ability to develop your golem and do it the way you want it. I like that variability. There is a golem track, and that's associated when you create them or destroy them. You move up or down that track, and that's where we talked about earlier, the scoring that goes along with that as part of your income. Mm-hmm. Then the third area that you can develop is your artifacts? Yeah. So here they look like boilers, I think, and associated with this was like the most confusing piece of the whole game because it was not clear at all how this piece worked.
Right.
But there's basically 4 boiler-looking things on your board that have gold bars pictured on them from 1 to 4, and you have to accumulate gold bars to activate that basic row of that ability. Mm-hmm. And there are upgrade sections on that row that you can add on that are unrelated completely to the gold bars, and that was one of the things that caused a lot of confusion because next to the gold bar section, you have this row of those upgrades that there's no significance or tie between the two. It's just, this is a place to store them.
Yeah.
So there's 3 different tiles that are 2-sided with 2 different abilities that you can choose any of those you want when you upgrade. You pay the cost in coin on the side to place the tile. You may not even trigger once you place it because if you haven't got the gold bars to activate that row, when you place the tile, it has no purpose other than to sit there until you do activate it. Mm-hmm. And it took us a long time to figure that out during the gameplay. It was not spelled out in a way it came natural to us anyway. But once we figured it out, I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool mechanism too. I like the mechanism.
Yeah, it was helpful for me. I got some extra knowledge out of it. So.
And this was the piece that everybody had a custom board for. And it's 2-sided with 2 different sides with different abilities. It's the problem with me is I'm OCD and I have to have the smooth side up. So even though there's a rough side and a smooth side that are different, I'll never end up playing with the rough side because it's just me. I can't do that.
Under normal circumstances, I would be right there with you, but I really wanted the extra victory point every time that we got our stuff.
So, well, I'm not, the
because
tiles,
I know who I'm playing against.
Yes, the tiles are that way, but on the other side of the board too, it's different.
Okay.
So yeah, there's that. So the cost to upgrade goes up as you go up the chart, and it's also harder to activate it. So, but you get more powerful abilities. So that makes sense to be that way. So basically, you're playing through 4 rounds of 3 actions of your 2 marbles and your rabbi. After that, then there is a card that represents each round that has a picture of 2 marbles on it of 2 different colors. If you match those 2 marbles, you get another bonus action that you can take based upon it. It's usually one, you can always take 3 coin. That's always on all the cards. Or there's usually a cost action where you spend coin and you can trigger some ability. So after that happens, then we get income, and that's based upon everything you've unlocked on your player board. That's going to give you income, and as well as moving your students up the track. Once you get to position 3 out of 10, you'll start getting income on those student tracks. That was really helpful because I rushed up those tracks pretty fast because I really was paranoid of getting behind my golem. I finally did just give up and let the golems run towards the front because the golems have abilities on these tracks too. So your students get resources. The tiles that are on there are what the golems can trigger when they stop. So they get more powerful as you go across. And one of them, like the last one here, was super useful for me, where it let me move all 3 of my students 1 more space up the track. And that was awesome. So in order to activate your golem, you have to, as they move, they stand up. And then once you activate them, you lay them down, and they can't be activated again until they move again, because that activates them again. So, and again, that also was not clearly stated. I mean, it was probably better than the others were, but we still had to go back and check that. There was a whole lot of referencing the rulebook all throughout the game. But you get perks as you move up. After you reach a certain point with your students, you can gain an extra menorah, which again is a multiplier for all the things you've unlocked on your board at the end of the game. So you want to get those, as many of those as possible. I actually think that's what gave me the game at the end, was I got a huge multiplier on one of my stats that I had built a lot of. So I got to jump up like 35 points onto the score.
I was trailing very far behind, but then at the end, I had all of my menorahs across the top here, so I got an 8 times multiplier.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it was, in the end, pretty close score. I mean, there was, everybody stayed fairly tight. I guess Miranda's dad was a little farther behind, but most everybody was right there at the end. So, I mean, I like games that give you a lot of ways of playing them. This one definitely does that.
Yes.
It gives you... there's not one strategy that feels like it's going to overpower the other ones, I didn't think. So all in all, I liked what feel of this game. As far as my score for it, I probably, if the rulebook really, that's the thing, is that just the thought of that, having to sift through that rulebook was the problem. Once I actually got to understand the game, I really enjoyed it a lot. Gameplay wise, I'm probably going to give this 9, I think. I like the mechanics of this game. And I'm not a big fan of Lorenzo. So this one was a huge step up for me from Lorenzo, because Lorenzo feels very limiting. This one, I didn't feel limited at all. But I do love Grand Austria Hotel, so it's kind of a hodgepodge. I like this one a lot, though, and I think I'm only going to like it more the more I play it. So what do you think?
I'm right there with you too. I was going to say for gameplay, I'd give it a 9. I'm a little bit biased. I like any game that has to do with books or art or artifacts, and this has 2 of those 3 things. So, that right away was, yes, I'm in. But like you said, I like that there's not really one way to win, and I like to focus. That's my thing. And so if I can focus on my little board and do my things, then I'm great. So
Yeah, I always love games where you can customize your own board and open up things the way you think it's most strategic for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this one has that in spades. And I gotta say, I liked building the creature. I mean, it felt like very Dr. Frankenstein-ish that I could, okay, I'm going to make this arm active and this leg active, and it's going to give me these abilities. And then I can, control the creatures and, activate them. At first I thought they were like hindrances, but then I realized they can be super powerful along the way. I mean, yes, you don't want them to run away, because if they get up ahead too far, once they get past you, you have to pay knowledge for each space they're ahead of your student on the track. And if they eventually get off to the point where they run off the board, is at the top, you have to pay either knowledge or victory points each step they take. And if they get to the end and they can't go anywhere, you have to move all the other golems. And once they're all at the top, you have to pay 5 victory points per track every time. And that can be brutal.
And I was getting very dangerously close to that for a minute there, too. I hadn't planned on building any golems because I was so focused on the knowledge stuff. But then I realized, A, that, and B, I needed to build 2 of them to complete one of my objectives. Yeah. So once I built the 2, it kind of helped me.
I think that's what hurt Dwight during the gameplay was the fact that he killed his golems all off, and he had no golems whatsoever for most of the game.
Right. Well, because in his thought process, if he didn't have them, he didn't have to move them, and they wouldn't run away from him. Yeah. Which, fine, but then you also can't activate anything.
Exactly. It takes away a good chunk of the action abilities you got. Right. And you're paying victory points because your track, once it goes down below a certain point, you start paying victory points each round as income. So, you kind of have to keep golems in play. And I think he realized that very late in the game, because he ended up with 2 golems, but they were the very first position.
Right, yeah. I think that was the last round we played, maybe.
Yeah. And not to mention the multipliers at the end of the game, the red menorahs are for having built golems. Mm-hmm. So if you don't build the golems, you can't really score for the red menorah. Right. So that's at 1/3 of your main scoring. I mean, there's other scoring you get too, but those are the main scoring. The three multipliers for red, yellow, and blue is the basis of your score for the most part.
Well, and I realized far too late that I should have started trying to collect the blue marbles and move down the blue track to get the blue menorah. And so I just thought at that point I need to just let that one go and focus on the board.
I kind of ignored the blue track too, which is not like me because I usually gravitate to blue. But the blue one, I was way farther behind than any of my other tracks because I started the game with no golem on the blue track. So I was like, well, I'm going to focus on moving up my other 2 since I have golems on them. And I just kind of ignored the blue track. And every time I created a creature in the blue track, I killed them off quickly. So I didn't have golems there to, advance.
Right.
But all in all, I think this is an excellent game. I just wish the rulebook wasn't so horrendous. I mean, now that I got it and understand it, I'm going to have to play this a few more times quickly so I can kind of get the sinking in of this, because otherwise I'm going to have to read through that rulebook again, and I just do not enjoy that prospect.
You make yourself a different cheat sheet to go into.
Yeah, I'm going to have to write my own rulebook for this game just so I can remember everything. Because it was a brutal learning curve.
That's the thing. I would rate the game really high. The rules were an issue, and I think it could grow on me now. Now that I know how to play. So. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to Rob's coming down soon, and I want to teach him this because this was what I got him for his birthday. He already knows, so it's no spoiler. Yeah. But I got him this game too because he was, before he even knew how to play, he knew he kind of wanted it because of that. And I was like, okay, well, that's what I'll get you for your birthday. So now that I know it, I want to teach him hopefully this weekend because he's coming down Saturday, and hopefully that'll help me sink it in some more too, because I know I'm going to forget this if I don't play it again soon. And even then I'll probably play it a few regularly, and given the fact that I enjoyed it so much, I want to. Yeah. So, well, if you need an extra player anytime,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, well, that's our thoughts on Golem. Yeah. So if you got a chance to play it, let us know what you think down in the comments. We'd love to hear. And either way, even if you haven't got to play it, if there's any thoughts you had on it or would like to know more, let us know. And make sure, again, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, hit it now, because it's going to go away when we go away. So, it won't be there. Well, it'll still be there if you go back to, you can watch this again and it'll be there again. But, it's join us along. So, all right, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.